I'm reviewing my fifth word for word Bible comic today. This comic is on the book of Judges, and it was originally released in 2023. As the other editions of the word for word Bible comic, this is a graphic novel that illustrates every single word of the biblical text using the 2011 NIV. Now, this is the first of the series that I have read that comes with their 15 and up age warning. Now, it receives this rating for bloody violence and adult themes, which shouldn't surprise anyone who has read the book of Judges, or even if you haven't read the book all the way through, if you're just familiar with the content. And I gotta say, it does merit that age rating. In this book, the blood flows freely. You can see it right from the cover image alone of what Samson might have looked like after killing 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. So this comic is not the type of bloodless violence that you would find in a Marvel superhero movie. When Jael drives a tent peg through Sisera's head, the image is what it would look like if you ducked into a tent the next day and found a man dead whose head had been nailed into the ground. It's brutal. And I kind of like that it is. I wouldn't want to read the Judges word for word Bible comic every time I read through the book of Judges, because at times I think the images of this graphic novel cross the line of being a little too much. And saying that they cross the line of being a little too much, this is not a negative to the skill of the artists or saying that they are needlessly graphic. But if you took the time to really imagine what is occurring on the pages of this book of the Bible, or even more so, if we could take a time machine to go back in time and watch the events of Judges take place, we would say this is too much. And I think there is value in having our often sanitized view of these books of the Bible, these non-violent images at times, to see just how brutal a time period Judges was. And if you have a few more minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Judges from the Word for Word Bible comic. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more about how to shine a light on your understanding of the Bible, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest book review. Also, give this a like, share this video with others so that you can help them know about the word for word Bible comic. A couple of years ago, my family went to see Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, the exhibition, and it was wonderful to see this life-sized recreation of the Sistine Chapel. And one of the things you learn as you walk through this exhibit about how Michelangelo took these narratives of the Bible and put them into art, that one of the things Michelangelo did was interpret the Bible into his culture and his time. So he placed Bible stories in the world of 16th century Italy. And I think at times we all have a temptation to take the Bible and place it into our minds of 21st century readers, or to sanitize them for our 21st century imagination. And the great thing about the word for word Bible comic is the research that they have engaged in and the time that they took to present at times brutal honesty of the events that take place in the Bible. The Bible was a world that had blood, poverty, violence, and it's hard to read Judges at times and remember just how brutal and cruel that time period that we're reading about was. In our morning Bible reading, it's easy to skim through those verses when you read that after 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men of the camp of Midian to turn on each other with a sword. And then we skip to the next verse, almost having a comedy of thinking, oh, how funny it is that Gideon tricked the Midianites and now they're attacking each other. But what happened in the Midianite tents wasn't funny. It was dark. It was violence, as brother ran brother through with the sword. And God gave Gideon a stunning victory, but it was not a pitiless victory. It was a victory as Midian lost thousands of lives. And this happens again and again in Judges. And I think we can become callous to what is actually occurring in these stories. And I think we should strive to avoid that type of callous interpretation of Judges. The purpose of Judges is to provide the reader with a stark, honest, and painful portrayal of what happens when God's people forget their God and run after the world of sin. What occurs isn't funny. The impacts of sin aren't comedy. And I think there are parts of Judges that can feel comedic when you're reading it through because you're not really thinking about how brutal these actions are. And so when I was reading through this comic, I was forced to pause again and again to really be thinking about how dark Israel was, how painful it was during those generations of sin, and what can happen to me if I'm not diligent in my own life to remember God, and about how I need to kill the sin in my own life before it kills me. The narrative of Samson and Delilah was especially powerful to me. We've all heard the story of how Delilah begged and pleaded with Samson to reveal the source of his strength, but I never really had the same physical reaction to this story that I had before while reading this graphic novel. Because as I'm reading this, I'm almost screaming with Samson, "Stop letting her toy with you!" For some reason, watching it all play out, seeing the image of his hands getting tied, his hair getting braided, it struck me how Samson, through his lust, allowed his lust to basically destroy his common sense, which is a pretty disturbing thought. Sin doesn't simply take immediate negative consequences in our life based on that sin, but if you engage in sin long enough, it will destroy your mental capacity entirely. How could Samson be so stupid? Well, that's what sin does to you. And the violence in this comic, I would say, is a step beyond PG-13 movies, which I think is where it should be. I'd put this comic book, this graphic novel, in the same category as the violence in films like Gladiator and Braveheart. So I would say that if you have a teen, a young adult, maybe even an older child age who's able to handle the violence in movies like that, then they're ready to read this comic. But if they aren't ready for that they're probably not ready for this. This is not a graphic novel that is for everyone. But this is for the person who desires to get beyond their own preconceptions, their own imaginations, their own experience of a life with a lack of violence, and then come to see what's really going on in the book of Judges, to get images that take you closer to what actually occurred. And I think there is quality application for allowing you to better appreciate the gravity of sin and where it could take you. So while I won't be reading this every time I go through Judges, if I do in my life going forward come to a point where I think I'm getting a little more callous to the degree of violence and degradation that took place during that time period, I'm going to read through this again to remember just how dark this book of the Bible becomes. And the next time I preach through Judges, I'm going to make sure I read this first so that I can bring that across in my preaching. So I want to say thank you again to the Word for Word Bible comic. Once again, quality work. And here it is on the book of Judges.